Well, good morning. How are you?
I'm good, Joe. How are you?
Good. So I invited our good friend and fellow colleague Pat Cummings to come on today. Pat, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Patrick Cummings. I have been with Shannon Law Group since February of 2014, so it's been about 6 years now. I'm in the Woodridge office right now. I grew up right next door in Lisle. I went to St. Joan of Arc with John, and then I also went to Bennett, and then on to Marquette, also with John, and then went to law school. I started in Philadelphia. I had a great time, 1 year in Philadelphia at Drexel, and then it was a little far from home, so I came back after my first year, and then went to Northern Illinois where I finished up, and then shortly after that started here.
So tell me about that Drexel experience. What was it like for a kid from Illinois? You spent some time close by in Milwaukee, but going to Philly. What was it like to go to Philly for a year?
Well, I guess I'll start by, I had some friends there before. So I studied abroad when I was a junior in college at Marquette in Galway, Ireland. And a lot of my people that I hung out with in Galway went to St. Joe's, another Jesuit institution in Philadelphia. And so that was part of the reason I went there, is I had a small base. I knew I wanted to get out of Chicago, at least for a period. And so I had a small base of friends there. So I went there, really enjoyed the people in Philadelphia. I'm not a Cubs fan, so I didn't have to deal with any Phillies fans. And the Eagles and Bears, I guess, now that rivalry means a little bit more after the double doink, but then it wasn't a huge rivalry. So I didn't take too much of the brunt of Philly sports fans.
So when you started here at the law firm, did you start as a lawyer?
I actually started as a clerk. So I started my 3L year, my last year of law school. I had arranged it so that I didn't have any classes or work on Friday. So I would come into Shannon Law Group on Fridays and some Saturday mornings just to kind of help out with some clerking stuff, drafting some motions, that kind of thing.
And so you graduated, and then you started working at our law firm right after that, right?
Yeah, so I graduated, and then I spent the 2 months after I graduated not working here, or maybe I don't even remember, I might have been working sort of moonlighting here while I was studying for the bar, and then took the bar, came back here, worked as a clerk for another couple months until we got the results, and then once I passed the bar, I started working here as a lawyer and started taking depositions pretty much right away.
So a lot of people don't understand what it means to pass the bar. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, my wife might be better to explain it, because they go basically dark for a period of months where I would actually took it with John and a couple of our friends from his law school, a prep course. And so every morning, I was living out here, I would take the train downtown to Chicago Kent Law School, and would have about 4 or 5 hours of kind of intensive education on topics that we took in law school, and then also some of the classes that maybe I didn't take, like commercial papers or some of the other subjects that I knew were potentially going to be on the bar, but I just didn't have the opportunity to take them in law school. And so you'd go down and you'd learn about those topics in the morning, and then you'd go home and you just take practice test after practice test to get yourself prepared. And
so what does it mean that when you pass the bar, what does it entitle you to do?
Well, you get your meal ticket. It means that you're employable as a lawyer, and so it's a kind of a great opportunity to help folks, to represent them. And a lot of times the people that we deal with are folks that are inexperienced with litigation and the justice system, and they're folks that are vulnerable and need help. And so by passing the bar and becoming a lawyer, you're entitled to step in their shoes and help them.
So I remember when I passed the bar a long time ago, there's a typically in the courtrooms throughout the U.S., there's a gallery in the back, and then there's like an actual bar with a gate on it, and then you can open the gate, and then you can walk through that gate and appear in front of a judge Is that what the bar is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's the bench and the bar. The bench is where the judge sits. The bar is lower in esteem and physically, and so you're allowed through the gates to approach the bar, and that's when you get to talk to judges. And when you're first starting out, at least my experience, I'm sure it was your experience, Joe, is nobody in law school tells you how to write orders or how to do a lot of the things that are very basic things that now, looking back, I'm like, how did you not know how to do that? But I definitely walked into courtrooms early, not understanding how to do those things. But the nice thing about the Chicagoland legal community is that I would just go up to somebody who maybe had some gray hair, and I said, "Hey, listen, this is my first time here. Can you help me out?" And overwhelmingly, people were very friendly, very helpful in that early stage.
So one of the things that's hit me over this last 30 years of practicing law is when I was a young lawyer, I didn't think about it as much, but not everybody can stand in court and represent somebody. You have to actually pass the bar and be, in Illinois, for example, you have to have the Illinois Supreme Court say that you are entitled to stand in front of a judge and represent either a person or an entity or a corporation. And so that's a pretty big deal when you think about it. It's a privilege and an honor to represent people. So why don't you tell the folks listening your first day of working here as a lawyer that passed the bar? What did you have to do?
So the first day specifically, I can't recall. I'm sure I came back to the office after getting sworn in, and I went right back to work on some of the things that I had been working on. But the first time that it actually hit me, you're a lawyer, is within a week. You sent me, responsibly or not, you sent me on an expert deposition. It was my first deposition and of a doctor, and it was a case that we ended up having to try, and then you're able to use that deposition testimony to cross-examine the doctor effectively at trial and get a great result for the client. But it was certainly a nerve-wracking experience.
So, one of the things that I've always thought in the practice, and I was grateful. I started the practice as a defense lawyer, like John Svitek, and I spent about 8 years representing large companies and big insurance companies. So I learned from those folks and the lawyers around me how to practice law. But one of the things I learned from that experience was some of my bosses gave me a lot of responsibility early on in smaller cases to learn and not be supervised and to have to do it on my own. Have you had that type of experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think there's a couple different ways of thought in terms of training young lawyers. And one of them is, which I think is a common practice in many big firms, is that you're brought along very slowly. And in some of these bigger firms, you may not see either the inside of a courtroom or a deposition for years after you get your law license. At Shannon Law Group, we've had sort of a different approach, and it's kind of a learn by doing. And so from, as I said, as early as a week after I became a lawyer, I'd been a lawyer for about 5 minutes, I was taking depositions. And for me, it was obviously nerve-wracking at the beginning, but sitting here 6 years out with all the experience and all the depositions I've taken, the trials I've had, all of that combined is stuff that I would not have been able to do over the past 6 years, maybe at other firms. And I think that I'm a much better lawyer because of it.
So why don't you tell the folks your trial experience in that 6 years? Have you actually, most people that are lawyers, talking around cocktail parties or whatever, they never tried a case, they never been inside a courtroom. Why don't you tell us your experience with respect to trials?
Yeah, so Joe and I have tried probably 7 or 8 cases together, some of them going all the way to verdict, some of them settling during the course of trial. And then I had one so far where I tried it all on my own. And what I've learned is, and what we've been able to accomplish at our firm, is that a lot of times the insurance companies will value cases differently than we do. And it becomes, once you impanel a jury of 12, that's when it becomes real for insurance companies. And we've had the good fortune in many of our trials, I think it's 3 out of the last 4 or 4 out of the last 5, where we've obtained for our clients judgments in excess of what the policy limits were, which means that an insurance company, they didn't think that the case was worth their full policy. And after trying the case, a jury believed not only is it worth the full policy, it's worth a lot more.
So one of the cases that we tried together involved a taxi cab driver that rammed into a beautiful woman. She was a nurse heading to her job. She had Parkinson's disease, and she got run over, and then she had a permanent shoulder injury. Do you remember that case?
I do,
Okay.
Very well.
And so why don't you tell the jury about that case, or the jury, why don't you tell the folks listening about that
You're
case?
still in lawyer mode.
I can't get out of it.
So
I
it
can't
is.
get out of
That was my first trial, and that was in. It was back when the Bulls were good, so it was probably like May 2015. And
Was Jimmy Butler still with him at that
he
point?
was. In fact, during trial, I was sitting at this desk watching LeBron James hit a three-pointer in Game 4, which was probably the last chance the Bulls had. But
That was the one in the corner, right?
yeah.
Oh my gosh, I remember like that. You just brought back a horrible memory.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you so
I
much.
apologize for that.
Yeah, that's right.
But anyways, this case against the taxi cab company, it was really a completely preventable case where this taxi cab company were just looking for bodies, and they did not do any vetting of this driver to make sure he was qualified, that he was safe, and they didn't do any training.
So in that taxi cab case that you and I tried together, that was your first trial experience, right?
It was trial by fire.
Okay, great. And this was about 5 years ago, right?
Yep.
All right. So you did all the motions, right?
I did.
And then you did a number of depositions for the trial, right?
Yep.
And in fact, one of the things that I really, in looking back on that case, that I feel good about was that we set a precedent with respect to punitive damages. Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah, we had a appellate court decision that is going to be used and cited by plaintiff lawyers across the state for hopefully many, many years. And what it did was it kind of helped establish the standard of what is acceptable when you entrust your vehicle to somebody else. So it particularly matters for commercial transportation companies like taxi cabs and potentially Lyft or Uber. And then probably the biggest area is the trucking cases. And so trucking, the stakes are raised. And the stakes are raised because it's not a sedan that you're driving, it's an 80,000 pound semi-tractor trailer. And so we need to make sure that folks that are driving those type of vehicles are completely vetted and they follow all the rules that they need to follow, so that we don't have unsafe drivers getting behind the wheel.
So in that case, just to break the suspense, the insurance company had offered, I think this lovely client of ours had a small amount of medical bills. Again, do you remember the number?
It was about 20,000.
About 20, yeah. And then we ended up, there was a jury that was a Cook County jury that really was listened to all the evidence, and I think it was a week-long trial, wasn't it, Pat?
It was, yep.
Yeah, and so we ended up getting in front of them, and so the way it works is that neither of the lawyers or the judge are the ones that award any damages. It's the jury, and the jury's empowered to do the right thing. And I always looked at our job, and I don't know if you look at it that way, Pat, but our job is to help the insurance company do the right thing. And we do that through getting all the evidence together, and showing them all the evidence, because we're required to do that before any trial, and then we put the evidence on. But I can't remember, a couple weeks before trial, do you remember what the offer was on that case?
A couple weeks before trial, it was in the $35,000 range, and then immediately before trial, I think it got up to maybe $70,000 or $75,000.
So the folks that I think are brave are the folks that we represent. They're offered $75,000, at trial. There's no guarantee they're gonna get anything. And the thing I liked about our client in that case and her husband, they trusted the jury, and I do too. We don't ever guarantee a win. What we do is we put cases on, and we try to give people their day in court, and we make sure that we only take cases that we will in fact cross the bar and put on in front of a judge and a jury. So we did that, and I remember the jury really working hard on that case, and I think do you remember what the total verdict was in that case?
Yeah, the verdict was $897,000.
Yeah, so just under $900,000, because this lady had a permanent disabling injury, and this jury wanted to make sure that this transportation company did not give the keys to somebody that had, tons of moving violations, didn't care about the public, wasn't qualified to drive, that type of thing. And I think, they appealed it, and the Illinois Appellate Court, in a great decision written by Justice Hyman, set forth a standard with respect to what's right or wrong in hiring a commercial driver.
Yeah, a couple other things about that case, Joe, is one, we gave the insurance company every single opportunity possible to do the right thing and resolve the case for within their policy limits to protect their insured, which is this taxi cab company. I think we sent something like 7 letters to them presenting all of the evidence and saying, your driver never showed up for his deposition. He's not going to show up for trial. I don't think a jury will like it. And also, the taxi cab company didn't follow any of the rules. They didn't go get his motor vehicle record. They didn't ask any of his past employers, is this a safe driver? They didn't do any of those things. And so we presented all that to the insurance company, and they told us basically to kick rocks, go try the case.
So anyway, that's the kind of commitment that I'm proud of in our law firm, is that we will take the case, we will try the case, and we will handle the appeal of the case to make sure that our client is zealously represented. So anyway, that was your first trial. Now, before you got to our firm, we handled a large case involving a trucker that had rammed in to stop traffic on 55, going way over the speed limit, and basically maimed my client, and then killed 2 other people. And we tried that case down in Will County, and it was the first case that held a broker liable for the acts of this trucking company, which had no financial responsibility. And so that case was one that Shannon Law Group handled, starting way in the late 2000s, and that went all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court. You remember that case?
I do. So that case is, because it's such a kind of an iconic case, not just at our firm, but statewide. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that case changed sort of an entire industry, the logistics and the broker industry and how they do business. And so, because I've read cited the appellate case a number of times, and also because all of the briefs I've had to use in subsequent trucking cases, because it is such a presidential case, I know the case well.
So have you handled any other trucking cases since that first commercial case that you tried?
We've handled a number of trucking cases, and a number of trucking cases where either the company employing the driver or the attorneys representing him might not have even recognized it as a trucking case.
So I understand that you've got this experience. You've been doing this for about 6 years. Why don't you tell the listeners about your first ever solo jury trial?
Sure. So I represented a kid who was a couple years older than me, who was in a limousine. He was being responsible with his friends on New Year's Eve, and he was in a limousine that was driving him home sometime after midnight. It was a snowy night, and this limousine was backing into a driveway right over here in Lisle, not far from where we are sitting right now. And as the limo is backing into this driveway, he's blocking a couple lanes of traffic, and they're T-boned. And our guy he's seriously injured his neck. He has a couple cervical fractures. And similar to the taxi cab case, the insurance company thought this case isn't worth anything. So they made us try it, and then so we did.
That's awesome. So this was your first solo trial. There was no Joe Shannon in sight, and you put it on. I remember telling Patrick that the assumption was that he would get 0. And I remember with him walking into the drinking establishment after the verdict and letting me know what the verdict was. And you can tell us what the verdict was.
Yeah, I think it was something like $203,000, but it was 12 or 13 times what their offer was. So it was certainly a good result for the client.
Well, that's a good solo. That's a good first solo. So we've had other commercial driving cases, right, Patrick?
Yes.
So the one thing that I ask the folks that work here to do is to not only keep all of this great knowledge to themselves, but to share it. So I'm really pleased that we now have a book that you put together.
I did.
Why don't you tell us about the book?
Sure. I wrote a book that's kind of directed for our clients. It's called Avoiding a Trucking Nightmare, What You Need to Know After a Truck-Related Injury. And what I found was that 99% of our clients, when they walk in our doors, they have no experience with the civil justice system. They don't know how anything works. And also they have more important things to worry about, namely their own recovery and their rehabilitation, to try to get as close as they can to what their former self was and their physical ability and functionality. And so for those folks, they have so many questions, but at the same time, they don't even know what to ask. So we may meet with a client and sign up a case, and we tell them, if you have any questions, you're going to have questions, reach out to us. What I wanted to do was get them a baseline of information so that they can read and understand a lot of the questions or what questions they should be asking. And so that's why we wrote the book, is to kind of give them some background understanding of how the process works and why it's important to engage with an attorney so that they can kind of shoulder the burden and shoulder the stress of litigation while they can focus on their own recovery.
So do you think this book would be valuable at all for attorneys that don't do what we do?
I do, certainly, because like many of the clients, attorneys that don't specialize in trucking law might not know how that process works. We've been through these battles before on a number of occasions, and so we've seen a lot of it, and we understand kind of how everything works. That's what's in this book, and so lawyers that maybe just handle kind of smaller motor vehicle cases or workers' comp cases or even family law, what have you, a lot of times they will get phone calls from folks that are involved in trucking cases because it's the lawyer down the street or it's a family member or friend. And for those attorneys that don't specialize in it, that's why this book would be good, A, to give them some baseline knowledge, and B, to show that we understand what we're doing. So give us a call.
And this is our second book we've put together. We had one called Transportation Law, which has been a pretty good book, background on that. This is our second book that we put together specifically with respect to trucking. and we're providing that free of charge to folks that want a copy. They just have to go to shannonlawgroup.com and request one, and we'll make sure that they get one. So I know that you represent people and you advocate for them in court. Do you do any other writing at all, Pat?
Well, I certainly write on our blog. And so our blog is a useful resource for clients or for people that maybe are deciding, do I need a lawyer? And we blog about all sorts of different practice areas that we cover. I know John writes a lot of vaccine blogs for our vaccine practice. Myself and you and Patrick and Jack, they all write trucking because that's kind of one of our specialties. And it's a really good resource with kind of current events. For example, this coronavirus, how that affects the trucking industry. It's something that's affected every industry, but we kind of specialize on how it affects. Our blog points out how it affects the different areas of law that we practice in.
So folks can go to shannonlawgroup.com and look at our blog. We have typically been writing a number of those articles with respect to novel things that come down, with respect to areas that maybe folks wouldn't understand the technical parts of things, but that's a good resource to go to. We also will be posting it on all our social media as well, so they can get it. Now, another thing I wanted to talk to you about, Patrick, is there's been some updates with this time that we're in. March 19th was just St. Joseph's Day, 2020. Again, I think folks will remember this time forever. It's kind of a watershed moment in our country with everybody social distancing, etc. Has it had any effect on the trucking industry?
It has. So the governing body of the interstate trucking industry is called the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And back in the 30s, when interstate trucking became kind of more prevalent, they issued federal regulations which govern these trucking companies and drivers. And the idea being they want to reduce trucking-related traffic crashes and injuries and deaths. And so the federal regs recently, less than a week ago, they've, well, I guess I'll go back. One of the key elements of the federal regulations is what's called hours of service time. And what the purpose of it is because drivers are paid by the mile. And so they're almost encouraged to work longer than they should be working. And so we had drivers that are operating these, again, 80,000 pound trucks while they're fatigued. And I think that there was a fatigued driver that was involved in your
in the Tala case, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the hours of service rules are put in place so that fatigued truck drivers who are dangerous drivers are not operating these dangerous vehicles.
So there's been a relaxation of those rules now, though, right?
And there has. Within the last week, they have, specifically for folks that are responding to the COVID-19 crisis, they don't have to follow the hours of service regulations, which is, while I understand the logic behind it in the sense that we need to stock our grocery shelves, we need to make sure that medical equipment is is provided. I'm nervous about the effects it'll have on highway safety.
Sure. So let's shift gears here real quick. What do you like to do in your free time?
Well, recently I've been kind of isolated, but usually what I like to do is I like to watch sports. I'm a big Marquette Golden Eagles fan. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan. I'm a Chicago White Sox fan. I love getting down to the ballpark as often as I can.
This could be a decent year for you guys, huh?
It is, and of course it's in limbo whether or not it's going to happen. My dad says it reminds him of the strike in 1994 when the White Sox were ready to win, and then of course it gets taken away. But that's not really the priority. And then also I like being outside. I like playing basketball. I like golfing with my buddies. So yeah, I do some woodworking when I have.
What have you made with the woodworking?
I made a coffee table. I've made a desk. I made some kind of trinkets like cutting boards. But I had a small point of pride a couple weeks ago. It's because we had to get rid of my coffee table because it was too big for the space, which my wife had been telling me for years. But it was my first project.
Yeah.
And so I went out and I threw it in the alley, and within about 20 minutes it had been picked up. So I in my head, I think that it's a centerpiece of someone's living room, but probably it's just some DePaul kids using it as a table for their games.
Okay. And do you have any pets at all?
I do. We have 2 dogs now. One is Riggins, who's probably about a 7-year-old German Shepherd mix, and then in April, my wife Caitlin convinced me to get a second one, which is we don't even know what it is, but it's a rescue. It's probably a 45-pound mutt of some sort.
Yeah. How do they get along?
Well, the younger one really likes Riggins, and Riggins sometimes likes the younger one and sometimes is a little curmudgeon-y.
That's great. Do you still get out and play a little basketball?
I do. I actually play Wednesday nights up in, there's a facility in Clarendon right off Montrose and Lakeshore Drive that I get out there and just get some cardio.
Great, great. Well, thanks so much for taking some time. And again, the book is called Avoiding a Trucking Nightmare. It is a really well, I reviewed the manuscript before it went in. In fact, I think I may have written a forward on it. Mm-hmm. But this is like a really terrific book with respect to the trucking industry in general and litigation, and then how it applies to our clients. So I think this will be a great resource for folks. So thanks for putting that together.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right. Thank you.
Hey everyone, this is Pat Cummings. To order a free copy of my new book, Trucking Nightmares, please email our marketing director, Brittany Peterson, at bpeterson@shannonlawgroup.com, or you can always give us a call at 312-578-9501. Hope you guys find some helpful information in there. Thanks.